Hey, welcome back. Not a Tame Sheep. Tonight we have Josh
Hi.
and Josh and Vince, and we are going to begin reviewing the James White, um, William Lane Craig debate on the problem of evil. It was 3 years ago, so we decided to finally get around to talking about it. The
Still
some of the
relevant.
admin, yeah, the admin part of the church split, apologetics admin team. And I rewatched it and I was like, man, this was 3 years ago. And I remember it like this, but there's so many specifics I didn't remember that I thought it'd probably be best if we just played it and then talked about it. Because I think the people that did see it, 3 years ago, that it'd be better to just show it again. So
Hmm.
And it was a pretty wild watch for us too. I know coming back after 3 years, it was way worse this time around than when I first watched it.
yeah, because you know so much more about the subject now.
Yeah, that's
Now
true.
you watch it like, I can't believe they're saying this. Yeah.
Yeah, it was my first time watching it, and it was a rough watch, but yeah, it was still very interesting. Like I thought it was going to be worse than it was, but I still, yeah,
I thought I
there's
was a
enough going on.
I thought I was a Molinist when I first watched it. Now I'm definitely not.
That this video can, yeah, change his
Convinced
mind.
me. Totally changed my mind back then too. It's the beginning of the end.
Yeah,
Yeah. My
it'll
wife
do
and I
that.
were just talking tonight about if anybody changes their minds that has these debates. Is James White going to change his mind after he debates William Lane Craig or Tim Stratton or
Yeah,
uh, Leighton Flowers? No, he's not going to change his mind on anything. But the people that watch will.
right.
So I think that's the
Exactly.
value in it. That
Yeah,
man, the people watching, you can, I don't know, you can tell. So yeah, let's just play the first, just the intro, and then let's stop after that because there were several things just in this introduction.
oh
The way
man,
that Justin introduces the problem is significant, and then just the banter that he has with James White before they even start discussing
hmm
the problem of evil is so interesting. So
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead and let's
Yeah.
play it, Vince. We'll
You
just
you
listen.
just let me know when to stop, okay?
I'll yell stop at you. Yeah.
Video discussion. I'm Justin Briley. This is Unbelievable, the show that aims to get you thinking. Today on the show, we're talking about Calvinism and Molinism. Which view of God's sovereignty best addresses the problem of evil? And today is a long-awaited pairing. William Lane Craig and James White join me to talk about their very different approaches to divine sovereignty. Bill is a well-known Christian philosopher, founder of Reasonable Faith, and has often defended a view of divine sovereignty known as Molinism, that he believes makes sense of human freedom and God's will being done, and the nature of moral evil ultimately in the world. James is the founder of Alpha and Omega Ministries, a well-known exponent of Calvinist theology through his books and broadcasts such as The Dividing Line. James will be responding with a Calvinist perspective to the question of evil, the view that God ultimately predestines all aspects of his creation, including human action, thought and will. So we'll be asking which one of these views, if true, best answers the problem of evil and suffering in our world. That's our subject today. Bill and James, welcome along to the show. Great to have you both with me.
Thank you, Justin.
Good to be with you.
Bill, let's start with you. You were last on this show to talk about your recent book, The Quest for the Historical Adam. You joined me with Joshua Swamidas for that. But I know you're a busy person. I think there's plans I read for a William Lane Craig Centre for Christian Philosophy, Theology and Apologetics. Tell us a little bit about that, Bill.
Well, we're seeking to establish an online curriculum in Christian philosophy, theology, and apologetics that would be affiliated with an already accredited, established Christian university or seminary, so that students who took these courses would get credit toward a degree from one of these institutions. And we're currently negotiating with some of these to see about the placement of the center there. In fact, just today, our team was in negotiations with one of these, and I'm supposed to get a report tomorrow morning about how the discussions went. I'm very anxious to hear what progress has been made.
Well, that'll be very exciting, and we look forward to hearing more about it. I know that you're welcoming those who want to support it at your website at the moment, but really excited about today's show as well, and we'll return in just a moment to get you to explain what may be, for some people, a new concept, Molinism. James, welcome back to the show. It's been too long. How long since we last had you on the show? Must at least be a couple of years, I think.
I think the last time I was in London, we didn't get a chance to do a program. But for a few years there, every time I was in London, we would do one, sometimes two in a day. So, yeah,
we would.
The world has changed a lot since I was jogging around London last. So, who knows if I'll ever get a chance to do that again? But certainly enjoyed the years that I got a chance to do it.
I mean, with everything that's changing in the world, I know that your show has really been picking up on some of the cultural issues. How would you say your ministry has been impacted in the last couple of years by COVID, especially?
That making application of the Christian worldview to what's going on has become an important aspect of that. And I'll have to admit that the past number of years, even before COVID, the changes in our world has forced me to think through my theology to a deeper level in certain areas than before. And yes, that has resulted in addressing issues that probably back in the 1990s wouldn't have seemed like would have been a good idea to go there. But now we don't have a choice. So things have changed very, very quickly. Bill and I aren't as young as we once were, and I don't know if Bill would agree, but I don't like having the ground shaking under my feet. You know, when I was younger, you expected tomorrow to be pretty much like today was, and that's not the way it is anymore. So it's a different world.
It certainly is. Yes, the rate of change, it seems to have just been accelerated by social media and everything else going on in the world. Look, we come to talk about, though, a particular theological, doctrinal, philosophical issue today. And we wanted to do this in the context of hopefully something that doesn't keep it too sort of abstract, but something that most people will be aware of, the problem of evil and suffering in the world. It is a common, it's common objection to God, to a good and loving God at least. And in a sense, we've lived through a great deal of suffering in the last 18 months to 2 years with the COVID epidemic. But maybe starting with you, James, where do you usually go with a pastoral response to this before you kind of get to a philosophical or doctrinal response? Let's say what because I know you have actually worked on hospital wards and things in the past, haven't you?
Yeah, in fact, most people don't know.
So it just kills me. Did you guys hear him say chance? I didn't get it. Did you pick up on that?
I didn't.
He said I didn't get a chance. I didn't have a chance.
Yeah, I did.
He's a determinist, right? It's God didn't determine me to. If God determines me to in the future, he's talking and using the word chance. And then he says, I was forced to think through my theology. It's like, no, you were determined, right? Yeah. You were determined to think through your theology. And, he's like, because of current events, I don't have a choice. Again, you're saying that it's current events that are making you do things. It's not God that is determining to, is willing and determining the things that happen.
The way that they talk is so often, like they'll argue that God speaks in a way that we can understand, but he can't articulate it the way that they're saying it is, even though they're living. When they speak, they can't articulate it. Like they're the ones who can articulate Calvinism because God couldn't, but they don't even speak that way day to day.
Yeah,
but they can easily articulate it, but they don't.
I think of that Jordan Peterson quote where he says something to the effect of, instead of asking someone what they believe, watch how they live their life, and you will know what they believe. Yeah. And when you watch how James White talks, he doesn't live his life like he believes his theology is true.
Right. the best way to know what someone believes is by how they act, not by what they say they believe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it goes like that. So the other thing that I wanted to point out was what Justin said. When he talked about the problem of evil, he talked about how a good God and a loving God, why there is evil when there is a good God and a loving God. And he said, we're going to talk today about how there is evil in the world. So if you listen closely to it, what he's saying is, how do you address the evil that is already here? Right? And that's not what the problem of evil asks.
Right.
The problem of evil is it has they call them horns. If God is all powerful, all knowing, and all good, then how did evil come into the world? It's not, why doesn't God stop the evil that is already here? If he's all powerful, all knowing, and all good, then how was there ever the first evil act? Why didn't he stop the first evil from coming into the world? Because we can all say, well, this evil came from that evil. Right. I was beat as a child, so I turn around and beat my girlfriend. But that's not what the problem of evil is. It's asking, how did evil ever come into the world? So either
God being those things stop evil from happening. But then the question is, what does God actually desire? Does he desire to program robots, or does he desire to save people who make choices?
Right. So when you're thinking about the problem of evil, the way that I like to point it out is that there's these three horns: omnipotence, omniscience, and omnibenevolence. All good, or all powerful, all knowing, and all good. So there's three avenues of ways that you can push back or defeat the Epicurean problem of evil. So either God lacked the power to stop evil from coming in the world, God lacked the goodness to want to stop evil from coming into the world, or God didn't know it was going to happen. Because if God is both willing and able to stop evil from coming into the world, then the existence of evil and an omnibenevolent and omnipotent God remains irreconcilable. That's what the problem of evil says. So I just wanted to go through the four main answers to the problem of evil. There's the Christian answer to the problem of evil, which you will find in the writings of Aquinas and C.S. Lewis. So
and the Bible.
Well, yeah, and the Bible. Right, yeah. In Genesis, right? So the way evil came into the world was Adam and Eve, right? Adam's son. So God created Adam a rational being. God created Adam with rectitude of nature. Rectitude of nature is the ability to go straight. So his nature was created straight. I like to quote Calvin, because Calvin says, I have everywhere asserted that man was created in the beginning perfectly upright. So Adam was created with rectitude of nature, which means Adam had the ability to refrain from sin. He had the ability to not sin and fall. Adam was, even Calvin says this in his commentary on Genesis, that Adam was created with the ability to live for, however, eternity or whatever, in the garden without sinning. So Adam was perfect and could do perfectly. Adam was given a test of obedience, a way for him to disobey, which would be the prohibition of the one tree. The ability to disobey was how God gave Adam what we call free will.
It made his yes have meaning at all. If there's no way for him to say no, then the yes is meaningless.
Mm-hmm.
Right. He has to be able to say both yes and no.
Right. Like actually be able to say either.
Right. God commanded Adam to not eat from the tree, which would be a decree.
Yep.
Right.
God,
from a sovereign Lord.
yes. And then the seventh point would be that God being omnibenevolence. Benevolence is to will the good of another. When God created Adam, Adam's will was ordered to the good. By ordered, we mean
Arranged.
Arranged. Yes, arranged to the good. Not he was also ordered to do good.
Good, yeah.
But ordered as in arranged properly, so ordered to the good. So like in Genesis 3:6, it says, when the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food. So their will was ordered to the good. So when they both looked at the food. If Eve looked at it and saw it was good for food, Adam would have looked at it and saw it was good for food, because their will was ordered to the good. So, C.S. Lewis quotes Thomas Aquinas: nothing which implies contradiction falls under the omnipotence of God. Even an omnipotent God can't make a round triangle. God can't give Adam the freedom, the ability to sin or not sin, to give him real freedom, to do all of those things and then stop him. Right. It's logically impossible. So that
call it rebellion, if that's all he could ever do.
Yeah, if he could only rebel or he could only obey,
then his rebellion is doing what he's supposed to do.
Right. So it's. I'll just read Lewis. So God's omnipotence means power to do all that is intrinsically possible, not to do the intrinsically impossible. This is no limit of God's power. If you choose to say God could give Adam free will and at the same time withhold free will from him, you have not succeeded in saying anything about God. So we're going by what Genesis 2 and Genesis 3 says here.
Right.
If you start with a logically consistent view of the omnipotence of God, the reason God being omnipotent didn't stop evil from coming into the world is because he can't give the good gifts of free will, what's described in the Bible, and then withhold it at the same time. So
it's not a power claim. It's as soon as he sorry. I had an alarm.
What a shame.
I know, I ruined it. It's not a power claim. It's as soon as he does that, it's no longer freedom. Like he just changed. Yeah, he made a square a circle. He didn't make a square circle.
Right. So that would be the first avenue, would be to show that even an omnipotent God can't, create a rational being, order the good, give him a test of obedience, and then intervene and stop him without being a liar
about his power.
Because he told him, you can surely eat from this tree, and then you can't go back and say, okay. So the second way would be to say that God is not all-knowing, that God he didn't know, right? He's like, oh, I'll make Adam and I'll do all of these things, and then maybe I could have, God could have stopped him, but he just didn't know he was going to do it. I don't know I've ever seen anybody say that in writing, but I'm just throwing it out there. It would be an avenue that if you want to say that, God could have stopped him, but he didn't know it was going to happen. I suppose that's something you could say.
I don't think he could have stopped him and still gotten what God has made pretty clear he wants, which is for us to have our own agency.
Right. And he gave him real freedom. The only way to give him real freedom is to give him the real freedom to obey or disobey.
Yeah, but if he didn't know, it'd still be real freedom if he attempted to stop him later, right? Because, we can attempt to stop people and they still have real freedom as long as we didn't know.
Right. Well, yeah, but the horse is out of the barn after he's after he's already done it, That would be, so evil has already come into the world then.
Yeah.
Okay, so the third avenue, which is the one that James White and William Lane Craig are both going to go with, is that an all-good God, an omnibenevolent God, would want to stop evil from coming into the world. Their argument is going to be that I'll just quote R.C. Sproul, quote, "When God wills evil, it's good that evil happens."
Right.
End quote. Okay? They're going to argue that God wanted Adam to sin, and James White, like Calvin, is going to argue that God willed Adam to sin, that he ordained Adam to sin, that he decreed Adam to sin, that he predestined Adam to sin, and it couldn't have been otherwise. And that God did all of that. He willed Adam to sin so that he could put all of his attributes on display in his creation.
Which is so crazy to me that's he thinks that, like, is that anywhere in scripture that God is like, I need to display
saying
right.
I need to do something
that's like,
in and
so
of itself is rough.
God's existence is his essence, and God has to create scenarios where his existence is manifested in such a way that he can display the results of his essence interacting within those certain scenarios. Like it makes I mean, that to me, that just makes us necessary, because God has to display everything, and how can he do that without us? And
right, but it's an error to say that God could have stopped Adam from sinning, therefore he wanted him to and he willed it. So there's their mistake. Now they have to justify the mistake. So now they're looking for a reason to justify that an omnibenevolent God not only wouldn't want to stop Adam, but would will Adam to do that.
As though he couldn't have something else that he desires even more than stopping sin, which
like
would again be right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, James White, he reads the Westminster Confession. Everything happens as God wills. Everything happens as God decrees. Everything happens as God ordains.
I don't know how you make that here with scripture at all, though. Like it's just right.
I read the verse where he's, God commanded.
It's nonstop saying like, you're doing things I don't want you to do, and then it will explicitly say that. Like,
so, and instead of quoting scripture, I'm going to quote Calvin. Quote. Okay. Wherefore, when God commands Adam not to taste the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, he thereby tests his obedience. Unquote. Even Calvin is saying that's a decree. A decree is a command of God. So Adam did otherwise than God's decree.
And it pits God's like his will against his heart. He'll just be like, I want this, but I will.
Well, he commands him to do one thing, and then wills him to do the opposite.
Right. He doesn't want you to do this, but you have to do this because he will. Like his will is not ever aligned with his desires, it seems.
The will of God is opposite the command of God.
Yeah.
So when you read a command in scripture, thou shalt not commit adultery, the real will of God is that you go and commit adultery.
Because it makes God look great if we do that.
Right. So when so when God says, hey, you guys are sacrificing children to Moloch, and that's not my will. It's like, well,
I mean, technically, God.
Well, actually, God, you commanded. You commanded us not to kill. Therefore, we know that we're supposed to kill. We're supposed to murder. It's just, it's absurd on its face. And that's what kind of. Well, so then the problem for William Lane Craig is he believes the same thing. He believes, and I can look it up in the Concordia and read it to you. But Molina pretty much just quotes Augustine, who William Lane Craig agrees with, that God could have stopped the fall. Therefore, Adam fell by God's will of permission. And I'm just like, well, if Adam had permission to eat the forbidden fruit, why are we calling it the forbidden fruit instead of the fruit of permission, and if he had permission, why did he punish him?
Determined.
Right? I mean,
Yeah.
you guys have kids. Do you give your kids permission to do something and then beat them for it? You know, kick them out of the house? And, you know, it's...
Who are you, oh man?
Who are you, oh my child? Just because I told you had permission, you should have known my absolute will is the opposite of my decreeing and prescriptive will, or whatever. You know,
child, you would know that that's what I meant.
And man, this is gonna make me look really good later when I beat my other kid because of what you did that I totally didn't want you to do, but I did.
But I need them to see what it is that I hate. Yeah.
Look, I ordained you, I decreed you, I willed it, but I'm also gonna,
You vessel of destruction.
Yes, I determined it for my glory, and you're good somehow. Somehow. So, do you guys got anything else to add, or you want to play another few minutes? We can go through what White.
No,
so let's play through White's explanation and stop it when William Lane Craig comes up.
Okay.
My second best distributed book is called Grieving, Our Path Back to Peace. It came out of my work as a hospital chaplain. That was the toughest work I ever did. I have debated Muslims in mosques in South Africa. I would rather do that any day of the week than the difficult work that I did in grieving and loss sessions in ICUs and in emergency rooms in a major hospital. And so, yes, I was forced to deal with this back in the early 1990s when I was put in that position. And it's interesting because most of the books that I read did not come from where I'm coming from as to God's relationship to evil, whether it's natural evil in the sense of a car accident, a flood, a lightning strike, whatever else it might be, or moral evil, shootings and drug overdoses and things like that. And most of the classes I had in seminary didn't address those things either. And so at that time, I was really forced to think through what I believed as a Reformed pastor. I was already involved in that type of work, and as a theologian. And so it's a vitally important issue. And I did have to come to conclusions as to how I was going to engage that subject that made it very difficult because the hospital I was working in was a secular hospital. And so we had, in fact, I stopped doing that work when they required me to start working with Wiccan chaplains. And it was, it was just too big of a gap to be able to.
Well, I mean, he just said the reason he stopped was because God determined him to stop, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's
in
just
other words,
you can't live your life as though your theology is true.
And people might think we're being petty too, like about his terminology. But if you like later on, we're gonna see James White be really petty about William Lane Craig's word choices way more than this, and so this is very fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, I bet you it would be hard to talk to like old like unsaved people who are dying in the hospital and be like, God wanted this for you.
Well, he was saying like these people are too different for me to bridge the gap. Or something. Like I don't even.
Yeah, imagine going up to an atheist with cancer and being like, "God determined this because it makes him look good, and He is pleased by your cancer." That would be a hard sell, I bet.
I can't sell this, so I'm just done.
Okay. Well, the other funny thing that I want to point out, I mean, not funny like you're being funny, inaccurate, but he just said. He was in seminary and he couldn't find a book that would address the subject the way that he does. And he wrote a book, and it's his second best-selling book. And
second best distributed. I was laughing about that.
Well, whatever.
It's just,
I have no doubt that the man pulls in a lot of money.
I'm sure. Yes.
Yeah, and I'm not dissing him for that. But his claim later is going to be that Molinism was invented in the 16th century, therefore it can't be true.
Yeah.
That was
You see
great.
where I'm going?
There's just
Yeah,
no interest.
I wrote that down 4
It's just-
times whenever that he started saying that.
I have notes on that.
Yeah.
I have like
So
30,
here's this whole
45-minute mark.
thing. Nobody has come up with what I've come up with, and that's why this book is so well distributed or whatever. It's my second best sold book, and it's because nobody else has written one like it. Okay,
Yeah.
James, we can't. You need to take that down because you didn't invent that until the 20th century.
Yeah. How could this
your
is going to be a shout out later?
Man-centered theology.
How could Isaiah have known that? He's going to say that later to William Lane Craig, but how?
He uses your argumentation he uses is the same argument you can make against Calvinism so often. Like he argues directly against Calvinism later on.
Yeah.
We should have paused this at a different place.
Keep going.
His face, yeah.
To bridge in that way. So yes, that was really where a lot of this, for me, took on flesh and became real life type stuff.
Yeah. Let's start then, before Bill introduces the Molinist perspective, just with a brief explanation of the Calvinist perspective. It's potentially, of the two tonight, the one that people might be most familiar with as a way of understanding God's sovereignty. But tell us firstly what it is fundamentally, and how you would address then the question as a Calvinist of why God allows evil and suffering in the world.
Well,
Justin, you may remember.
There you go. Why God allows.
He permits it.
Well, right. See, they've already snuck the solution into the question.
Is Justin Calvinist? I don't know his background.
Well, but that would be Roman. It doesn't matter because Roman Catholic, that's Augustine.
Okay, yeah.
So it wouldn't matter if he's Roman Catholic, if he's Anglican. It's like 98% of the theologians or philosophers that have written on this all assume that God could have stopped Adam from sinning, therefore God allowed it.
Right.
Or it was he permitted it, or his will of permission, or whatever.
Like, I don't know that anyone's arguing that God could not have done, like he couldn't have stopped Adam, but it would have changed everything that he's trying to do.
Well, he couldn't have stopped Adam after telling him he was free to eat from every tree because he would have
because of his nature, right? And his nature wouldn't allow him to. Yeah. Right.
So that's the point. That it's like nobody can grasp that other than a few,
because to them his goodness is derived from his will.
Yes, what he wills is good because he so willed it. That's half of our
change. Yeah.
Yes, and that's what White is going to do. So I just wanted to again point out that the moderator has already snuck in the assumption.
The language is all there.
Right, that both of these guys are going to assume is true.
Right.
And when at the end, when William Lane Craig refers to Flint's book, they say, who should you read? And he recommends Flint. That's what Flint says. So he's getting it from Flint, and he's not even questioning it. So they're all assuming the same philosophical assumption that an omnipotent God could have intervened and stopped Adam from sinning after Genesis 2:17. So now we have to justify why God allowed it or God ordained it.
I take so much more issue with even any of this, but it's irrelevant to the topic. So go ahead, Vince, and play it.
Remember that when Bill and Paul Helm had a discussion on your program in 2014, you got to the last 5 minutes, and the most important stuff was said in the last 5 minutes. And even you said, that's a really helpful discussion. But it was in the last 5 minutes. You couldn't expand it beyond there. So hopefully we'll get back to that level before the last 5 minutes of the program, because it's really where I think the rubber meets the road. Because from the Reformed perspective, the Westminster Confession of Faith, London Baptist Confession of Faith very clearly says that God foreordains decrees whatsoever comes to pass in time, and then immediately discusses the issue of the will of man and everything that flows from that. But first and foremost is the decree of God, that God not only is the creator of all things, but because he is the creator of all things, then he is the one who has determined the very fabric of time. And that's why events in time have meaning. That's why something like the incarnation can have meaning. And evil has meaning because Christ has to come to deal with this issue. And so it has meaning. And that means the decree of God is not something that results in mankind being mere puppets. Instead, that decree is what makes events in time meaningful. But the real question is, where is the source of this decree? And the emphasis of the scriptures is, there's a couple particular terms that are used, but in Ephesians chapter 1, we're told that this is according to the eudokia of his will, the good, kind intention, that which is pleasing to him. And it's interesting that that's about salvation, but then later on in that same chapter, when Paul talks about working all things according to the counsel of his will, that's the decision of his will that has worked all things out. And so the Reformed perspective on the existence of evil has to take into consideration the fact that God is glorifying himself in all that he has created. So he is demonstrating the full range of his attributes. So yes, there's the negative in dealing with judgment, in dealing with evil, his power, his justice, his holiness, and the positive, his grace, his love, and his mercy. These things are all being demonstrated in his decree, in the creation that he has made. And so where we're going to eventually have to discuss our differences, Bill has often talked about the meticulous providence of God and his sovereignty. So that's not a difference between us. It's the ground that gives rise to what that sovereignty actually does that is the issue between the Calvinist and the Molinist. And that has to do with God's knowledge, when he has knowledge, and issues related to that. I'll let Bill define those things. But that's why I was saying at the beginning, that's the key issue. That's what was gotten to in the last 5 minutes of a program 7 years ago, almost 7 years ago. Actually, almost 8 years ago, now that I think about it, doing math right. So hopefully we'll be able to get to that and then be able to elucidate upon that a little bit more once we get there.
Well, James has a good memory there, Bill. It was 8 years ago, actually, that you met Paul Helm in our London studio on that occasion. I think you were over for the C.S. Lewis symposium. And
yes,
and
probably. Boy, how time flies.
I know, goodness. But yes, that and I will post that now that you've mentioned it, James, as another follow up for people to go and listen to, because that was an excellent discussion.
Yeah, it's probably good.
Yep. No, I thought it was interesting that, he was going on, about how where he was talking about God's decree and where it stems and how everything starts with God's decree, everything flows from it and makes it meaningful. And then he says, but it doesn't make people puppets. Even though the logical conclusion is like, actually, it does.
Well, he literally says, not verbatim, but the logical entailment is evil has meaning because Jesus needs to come deal with the problem of evil.
Yeah, just to
I mean, that's it.
Yeah,
it's like evil's meaning is derived from the fact that Jesus needs something to defeat, basically.
Yeah,
that's the God decreed the problem God decreed as a solution to the problem of his goodness being unknowable without something to compare it to or something. It's like, I don't know.
It'd be like me making my son punch himself in the face, like, like to stop hitting yourself, and then like refraining from that and be like, I'm a hero, son. I saved you.
Grab his fist and you're like, see what a good dad I am.
So I'm going to read Calvin, because what White is saying isn't new, So here's Calvin, quote, "For although God did not create the sins of men, who but God did create the natures of men themselves, which are in themselves undoubtedly good, but from which there were destined to proceed evils and sins according to the pleasure of his will. And in many such sins as would be visited with eternal punishment. If it be asked, why did God create such natures? The reply is, because he willed to create them. Why did he so will? Who art thou, O man, that repliest against God?
It's like we have the solution. We've thought about these problems, but they haven't. They didn't come up with a solution. They just were like, we got to this point. It sounds pretty good. If you doubt it, I mean, pat yourself on the back and call it faith for believing. Like,
right.
It's just, yep. It's so bad.
And, again, to quote Calvin, God and the devil will the same thing. They do so in an utterly different manner, unquote. God and the devil will the same thing.
That's a real quote?
That's a real quote.
That's not paraphrased?
No.
Oh my gosh, dude. That's so great. Oh, man. Wild.
And then God and the devil will the same thing. So the eudokia, the pleasure of God's will and doing all of this, it's like, well, is God the author of that?
I don't know how he's not the author of anything, even when they're like, evil is the lack of good.
But you're doing the will of God. And it's like God willed Adam. Again, Calvin.
Does God know evil is going to happen where he permits it or removes himself so that evil happens? Does he know the consequence of removing himself? Like, but there's no way around it. There's
no will of permission in Calvinism. Calvin specifically argues against a will of permission.
Then so their argument is literally just, but he does it in a way that he's not responsible. That's the argument.
Yeah,
it's right. You appeal the mystery. Yes,
it's just
right. But it could not be otherwise. Adam could not but fall according to the foreknowledge and will of God. That's what Calvin says. Adam had to fall because God willed it and ordained it. And it's like, okay, who's the author of what God wills? James White does this whole thing about the eudokia and that's all determined by the decree of God. Who's the author of that, James? And William Lane Craig never once asked him, who's the author of the will that wills all of these evils? Who's the author of what God determines, Who's the author of what God predestines? Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say William Lane Craig missed a bunch of opportunities. It was disappointing. Yeah. It was sad. Because Vince and I were talking, like, he's so likable. He's such a sweet guy.
Yes.
And he's just not a great debater.
He's the uncle you wish you had, right?
Yeah. I was saying he's probably an awesome grandpa or whatever.
Great guy.
And James White's arguments were so bad. Like, anybody else would have just, I feel like, just ripped James White.
Well, wait until we do Tim Stratton's debate.
Okay.
Oh, there goes the dogs. So, so I guess the only other thing that I wanted to point out was he's also saying that God created the reprobate for the day of evil to show his glory by, giving them justice, And so God damned most people to hell from his creative decree, right? God damned most people to hell to bring glory to himself.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, where do you find that in the Bible?
You don't.
It's the opposite, that God takes no pleasure in the death of the wicked. But James White just explained that God takes pleasure in the death, the destruction of most people. That's the reason he made them.
This is why I was saying they pit his heart against his will. Like it's war. They're at war with each other. It's like, I don't want anyone to die, except for most people.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And then the other one was that I was going to look for, but I don't see it right at this moment, was where Calvin talks about mercy. Because so later in the debate, White is going to talk about attributes and characteristics. So love is an attribute of God, whereas grace and mercy are characteristics, because mercy comes from grace and grace comes from love. So love is an attribute, and then, if you're medieval, then grace and mercy are accidents. If you're speaking of it in modern terms, grace and mercy are characteristics. But Calvin says that God gives enough mercy to all people that the elect will be saved, and he gives enough mercy to all of the reprobates so that he is justified in damning them to hell.
Where is that? Where is
I know.
that?
He could.
Show me any passage.
Right, pause it, Vince, and I'll look for it.
Like the Romans 1 doesn't even word it like that. It's like everyone has the same amount of truth, or enough to seek and find.
Nah, don't you remember James White says that all of this flows straight from the Bible? Don't just trust him, bro.
That's driving me so crazy. And then he's pointing to William Lane Craig, saying, like, you
need it.
You're bringing all these presuppositions to Scripture. I'm like, dude, man.
William Lane Craig called him out on it too, but James
did a good job at that.
Yeah, James White had that swagger, he's just like, nah, dude.
He's a rhetorician, he is
good at it.
Debater.
Yeah.
But his arguments are correct.
We are by the way sitting at around 45 minutes. So
just let me
no problem.
Let me find this, and then I'm gonna read this one and one more.
Okay, I'm gonna pause the recording right now. I popped it back in.
Oh, I thought you already did. Okay, here's the quote by Calvin. Quote, I obtain thereby the next conclusion, that the mercy of God is offered equally to those who believe and to those who believe not, so that those who are not divinely taught within are only rendered inexcusable, not saved. So God has mercy on all of the reprobate so that they are rendered inexcusable, and he can justly damn them to hell for eternity to bring glory to himself.
What a mercy.
Which also seems like theater, because why does he need to justly do it? Like, he can just justify whatever he wants. He's God, who are you, oh man? Why does he have to even give them enough to be like, look, I've made them blameworthy? Right. I don't even understand that. Like, why does he
need a reason, right?
Right. It's so silly. Why does
They probably
why does he make the illusion?
They probably thinks it solves some kind of moral quandary, but it doesn't. It just makes it way worse. They're probably like, if we give them enough responsibility, then they chose it. Nah, that
they want it to be this legal system, but then also say, "Who are you, oh man?" Like, God set the terms, but it's all theater. It's just he has to make it look organic, like it all comes about naturally, but he doesn't at the same time, is what they're saying. And it's just they're constantly holding these untenable positions that just don't make sense.
Yep.
Okay, so this is Lorraine Bettner, The Reformed Doctrine of Predestination. Just to show that this isn't a James White invention. So he says, many of the divine attributes were displayed through the creation and government of the world, but the attribute of justice could be shown only to creatures deserving punishment, and the attribute of grace or of mercy or grace could be shown only to creatures in misery. Until man's fall into sin and redemption from it, these attributes, so far as we can learn, had been unexercised and undisplayed, and consequently were unknown to any but God himself from all eternity. Had not sin been admitted to the creation, these attributes would have remained buried in an eternal night. And the universe, without the knowledge of these attributes, would be like the earth without the light of the sun. Sin then is permitted in order that the mercy of God may be shown in its forgiveness, and that his justice may be shown in its punishment. Its entrance is the result of a subtle design which God formed in eternity, and through which he purposed to reveal himself to his rational creatures as complete and full-orbed in all conceivable perfections. Even the fall of Adam, and through him the fall of the race, was not by chance or accident, but was so ordained in the secret counsels of God. In fact, the plan for the whole course of the world's events, including the fall, redemption, and all the other events, were before God in its completeness before he ever brought the creation into existence, and he deliberately ordered it that his series of events and not some other series should become actual. The fall of man, therefore, was only one part and a necessary part of the plan. We hold that God foreplanned and foresaw the fall, that in no sense came as a surprise to him, and that after it had occurred, he did not feel that he had made a mistake in creating man. And then this one is the kicker right here. Again, Lorraine Boutner, quote, God in no way compelled man to fall. He simply withheld that undeserved constraining grace with which Adam would infallibly not have fallen, which grace he was under no obligation to bestow, end quote.
Right.
Yeah. The reason Adam sinned was because God withheld grace.
Which means he chose. I mean, he had to know the consequence of withholding that grace. So he chose where the sin and evil was going to occur. And then,
yeah, he ordained it. He decreed it.
Yeah.
Before he ever even created, he planned.
Before that, though, all of that, like, what was it?
And it's his good pleasure. Why was he upset?
Right.
Yeah.
This is all his good pleasure. Why?
No, that's all theater. It's got to look like there's a relational.
Right. Yeah. What's
Why
interesting?
did the Tower of Babel bother God? It was his good. They were doing his good pleasure. It's just bizarre.
Yeah.
Why did he curse Adam and Eve for doing his good pleasure?
Right.
Why did it? Because they're also going to believe in PSA. Like, why pour out his wrath on his son for what humans did when, like, it was his pleasure that it happened?
It was his good pleasure that they did it.
It's just I don't know how you get away from it being theater, and I know they think that's not a good argument, but it is. Like, I don't.
It's baffling.
What's the purpose of it? What's the purpose of God making everything look organic when he can just do what he wants? But the longer passage you read, I'm trying to remember what part I was taking issue with. Basically, his justice is necessary, but that only exists in a certain context.
Well,
in a certain scenario. It can only be displayed in a context that doesn't exist yet. So he has to create the context for his justice to exist in, but it existed before the context existed.
Which means that God wasn't fully himself until he created.
Right, he's like becoming. It at every turn. I'm like this, and then today I'm getting told my theology is inconsistent by a Calvinist. I'm like, dude, come on,
dude, read Calvin, please.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
All right, guys, you want to wrap this one up?
Yeah, let's wrap this up. We'll start with William Lane Craig and
perfect.
All right, so this was fun, guys.
This was fun, and for those listening, thanks for coming out.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Yeah.
Next time, right? You're gonna be here next time?
Yeah.
Let's see you guys.